You're listening to the Patenting for Inventors podcast with registered patent attorney, Dr. Adam Diamond, founder of Diamond Patent Law, the #1 source for securing your intellectual property needs. Now, here's your host, Adam Diamond.
Hello and welcome to the Patenting for Inventors podcast, episode 53, How to Amend the Patent Application Specification. My name is Dr. Adam Diamond, a registered patent attorney and founder and owner of Diamond Patent Law in Los Angeles, California. I can be contacted through my website at diamondpatentlaw.com. That's D-I-A-M-E-N-T, patentlaw.com. Or if that's too hard to remember, you can get to it through patentingforinventors.com. That's patentingforinventors.com. Or call me at 424-281-0162. And while most attorneys can only practice in states where they're members of that state's bar, patent attorneys are actually allowed to practice patent law in any state. So feel free to contact me regardless of where you live. I just reached the 1-year anniversary of this podcast. With a new episode pretty much coming every week. And if you've been with me the whole time, or even if you're a new listener, I'd like to thank you for listening and thank those who've actually connected with me and retained me to do some of their patent applications. Now, I don't hold anything back in these podcasts, so for some of you, you might be listening and you've done a lot of other research and you want to take this advice and try to file your own application. It's not impossible, but it can be done. But if you've been listening to all the episodes, hopefully you've seen that this can be a complicated process and you'd rather not do it yourself and you'd rather have a professional patent attorney handle it. So this podcast is as much of an advertisement for my services as it is informative. Now, if you listen to a brain surgeon have a podcast called How to Do Brain Surgery, and he or she went through all the steps of how to remove a brain tumor, you might find it informative and you're glad you know the information, but you'd still rather have a professional do it, which is probably wise. Maybe there's a medical podcast out there about how to remove a splinter and you feel you don't really need to go to the doctor, and watching a video or podcast is good enough for your needs. So the same goes here. You might want to try patenting yourself, and there's lots of what are called pro se applicants, which means the inventor files without a patent agent or attorney. But you do that at your own risk. Sometimes it may work out, but many times it doesn't, and it's just a risk you have to decide for yourself. Now, I would strongly suggest using a patent attorney or agent. Patent law is very specific. It's the only area of law where general attorneys are not allowed to practice. Patent attorneys and agents have to pass a separate bar exam in order to practice before the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So if regular attorneys aren't even allowed to prepare and file a patent application for you, you might want to question whether it's worth it for you to try it yourself. Is it worth $5,000 to $15,000 for your business to do it yourself? That's really only something you can answer. I've seen people do it themselves and do it so poorly that by the time it got to me, I couldn't help them anymore because there was no way to fix their application and the deadlines have already passed to file a new application. So it's really inventor beware when it comes to filing your own patent application. So now back to the regularly scheduled programming for this podcast. In the previous episode, I talked about how to amend the drawings, but before that, I talked about how to amend the claims. In this episode, I'm talking about the last place where you might need to amend something, and that's the specification. The specification technically is the entirety of your application, but when people talk about amending the specification, what they really mean is amending something that is not the drawings or the claim. So that's usually the written description part of your application, summary of the invention, or abstract or background section of your application. So some reasons why you might need to amend the specification are typos, or maybe you put in something in your background section and you meant to include it in the summary or in the brief description of the drawings and you mixed up which drawings were talking about what, so you need to fix that. Maybe you did some cut and paste jobs and accidentally duplicated a paragraph. I once got an objection to the specification because the examiner thought that my brief summary of the invention was too long. It wasn't brief enough. So I cut and paste large parts of that from the brief summary and put it into the detailed description part. Now, I've said this probably a dozen times, and it's worth repeating a dozen more. You cannot add new matter to an application after you filed it. So you can't amend your specification because you forgot to talk about a variation of your invention and you want to include it now. If you want to do that, you have to file a new application, either as an entirely new application or a continuation in part application, which I haven't gotten into, but I will get to in later episodes. So how do you amend the specification? There are basically two ways. If there's just a few minor things, you can do it right inside of your response. But if there are major revisions, what you have to do is submit what's called a substitute specification. When you submit a substitute specification, you have to include two versions of it. You have to submit a clean version and a marked up version. In the header of each page on the top margin, you write substitute specification dash marked up. And in the other version, you write substitute specification dash clean. Now let's talk about the marked up version first. Anything you want to change, you're going to do one of three things. You underline things that are new, you do a strike through of things that are deleting, and if it's a very small deletion under 5 characters like a word, then you can do double open brackets on one side and then double close brackets on the other side. For example, if you want to delete the word of, you do open bracket twice, and then the word of, and then close bracket twice. If you want to replace the word listing with the word list, what you do, since listing has 7 letters, what you do is a strike through of the word listing, and then right after that, you put in the word list, and you underline that word list, because that's new. Now, in theory, you could do double brackets around the ing of listing and call it, just call it a day. I guess in theory, you could do that because you're just deleting 3 letters, but I wouldn't do that. Just delete the first full words and sentences, and do that for the entirety of your substitute specification. If this sounds familiar, it's because you probably listened to how to amend the claims, because if you amend the claims, you do it in the same way, either a strike through, brackets, or underline. It's the same rules. For the clean version of your specification, have the top margin say substitute specification clean, and it's put in the clean version. So actually remove anything that had double brackets or strike throughs, and you add in the things that are underlined. So it's just the final version of what it should look like. The other way to amend the specification, especially if it's just a few things that you need to amend, is that you don't submit a substitute specification. You just write about what you want changed in your response to the office action. In one of your sections in the response, you'll write amendments to the specification. Hopefully you numbered each of your paragraphs initially when you did your application. And what you'll do is right underneath the heading of amendments to the specification, you write what you want amended. Let's say you want to replace paragraph 21 because it had a bunch of typos in it. You write, please replace paragraph 21 with the following amended paragraph. Below that, you put in the entirety of your new paragraph 21, and you have it marked up with underlines, brackets, or strike throughs, and you don't put in any clean version. If you're adding a paragraph, you can write, please add the following paragraph after paragraph 75, and then you add in that paragraph. If you add in an entirely new paragraph, you don't need to underline it. If you want to delete a paragraph, you also don't need to do strike through of the entire paragraph. You can just write, please delete paragraph 71. If you didn't do paragraphs, just write the best to your ability of what should be deleted. Maybe you would write, please delete the paragraph that starts on page 2 and begins with, and just say the words that it begins with. In this section of the response, don't talk about why you are amending things. Save that for the section called remarks or arguments, where you can say that certain paragraphs have been amended to fix typos, or if you're adding in something new, say why you're able to add in a new paragraph without adding new matter. So you can say, the new paragraph summarizes the general terms of the features that were previously discussed in paragraphs 25 through 40. It's really fact specific, so I can't tell you exactly how to add and how to add words, because it really depends on what you're actually adding and why. So how do you know whether to do the amendments to the specification directly in the response, or whether you need a brand new substitute specification? The examiner will tell you if you need a substitute specification if it's required in the office action. If you don't see a requirement to do a substitute specification, then you don't need to do it. You also don't have to wait to do any amendments before you get an office action. If you realize you made a mistake in something or you caught some typos and you want to fix it right away, you can file what's called a preliminary amendment. And you just make those amendments, you can do it right away. If it's really minor, I would just wait for your first office action, because you might decide to abandon the application anyway if you got a really bad rejection and it's not worth responding at all. But if you think that you need to fix something up and it will really impact how your application will be examined, then you might want to do a preliminary amendment. I haven't talked about preliminary amendments yet, but I'll get to those in a future episode. That's about it for amendments to the specification. You can do a substitute specification with a clean and marked up version. Remember to underline, bracket, or strike through what is necessary, or if you don't need to do a full substitute specification, you can say what you're amending right inside your response in a section called Amendments to the Specification. Then in the remarks section, write about why you made those amendments. And for the 100th time, do not put in any new matter in any amendments you make. Make sure any amendments you make are supported somewhere else in your specification. If you want help with your patent application, you can contact me through my website at patentingforinventors.com. That's patentingforinventors.com, or call Diamond Patent Law at 424-281-0162. I'm Adam Diamond, and until next time, keep on inventing.
Thanks for listening to the Patenting for Inventors podcast with host Adam Diamond. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review on iTunes. The contents of this podcast are intended for general informational purposes only. The facts of every legal matter are unique, and the content of this podcast should not be construed as offering legal advice for your specific legal situation. For more information and help with your own intellectual property needs, contact Adam Diamond at patentingforinventors.com. That's patentingforinventors.com, or call Diamond Patent Law at 424-281-0162. The preceding information may be considered an attorney advertisement and does not establish any attorney-client relationship.